Batman has become a staple of modern cinema. He's responsible for some of the best and some of the worst moments in cinematic history. And since the Snyder Cut is right around the corner, and we'll be getting a look at the Joker and potentially Ben Affleck's final performance as Batman, I figure that's what we take a look at today. We're going to be ranking the Batman films. Quick side note, we're only going to be looking at the films from 1989 to 2012, because those are the only ones that I've seen, and I feel like those are the only ones that most people have seen. And I feel like those are the most popular interpretations of the character. Whilst I appreciate the 1966 movie, I personally just haven't seen it or have any connection with that interpretation of the character. They used to play reruns of the Adam West TV show over here in the UK after school, but for me, I never really watched it often enough or had any real relationship with that version of the character. I also think they made two movies in the 1940s which also won't be included on this list. So we're only really going to be looking at the films from the Michael Keaton era to the Christian Bale era. Now, let's get into this. Batman and Robin is not a good movie. I know some people have come to love and appreciate it along with Batman Forever, but I watched it recently for a video which is linked above and I did not enjoy it. I understand at the age I am now, I'm not the audience that those films are looking for. And I mean, don't get me wrong, at the time, like I say in the video, I enjoyed Batman and Robin, I enjoyed Batman Forever. When I was a kid, growing up, you don't really think about these things. You're just a kid, you kind of just go along for the ride, there's flashing lights, and you just kind of enjoy it. But when you look at them as movies, they're just not very good. The dialogue is cringy, the acting is questionable, but like I said, I'm not the audience for these movies. They're absolutely made for kids, and they made Warner Brothers a lot of money, because they were basically just marketing tools to sell toys. Batman has always sold merchandise, but it's never been more in your face than it was with these two movies. So with that, I'm ranking Batman and Robin dead last and Batman Forever slightly ahead. I believe that Batman Forever is the better film. There's still moments in there that are just absolutely laughable. But like I said, these movies are for kids, and I've made videos on that, so if you want to check it out, I'll link it above. And of course, there's a reason that the movies were made the way that they were. Tim Burton was originally supposed to direct a third Batman movie with Michael Keaton, but after the marketing campaign for Batman Returns was an absolute mess, sparking fan outrage, Warner Brothers decided to go in a more family-friendly direction. All of this is covered in my rewatching the Schumacher Batman films video, but in short, McDonald's made a deal with Warner Brothers to market Batman Returns in their Happy Meal promotion, and it turned out the characters in the film didn't really match the figures that came with the Happy Meal. Parents were outraged and felt like the film was too dark for children. All of this basically forced Warner Brothers into going in a more family-friendly direction, especially if they wanted to keep on picking up those $500 million merchandise checks. But anyways, both Schumacher films are ranked last and second last on my list. They aren't without merit. I just absolutely believe that better Batman films came before and better Batman films came after. Moving on. Batman Returns. Now this is a film that set off the whole mess that was the Schumacher movies. Aesthetically, I love this film. I've always been a big fan of how Tim Burton's movies look. I feel like the studio gave Burton free rein to do whatever he wanted with this film, and it shows. But I'm sat here looking at it like, should they have given him free rein? So I've always been a big fan of how his films look and who he casts. I'm a fan of Tim Burton, and I know it sounds like I'm about to rip into this movie. I mean, don't get me wrong, this film's okay, you know, it's alright. It's not a terrible movie by any means. It's just a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, after the success of the first Batman film, I can understand why they gave him free rein. But kids were always going to come and watch this film, especially given the fact that the studio made a deal with McDonald's of all places. Do you really need the Penguin walking around making weird sex jokes? Flaming clowns walking around and all this kind of stuff? I mean, I get the fan outrage. Some of the stuff that Burton included in this film would have scared the shit out of me as a kid. But as someone who is an adult, I can watch this film and get some enjoyment out of it. It's okay, you know, it's not a terrible movie. It's really funny in hindsight because as someone who wasn't alive when this film was made, this is the exact movie I would expect Tim Burton to make if he was given free rein to make a Batman film. With the super gothic aesthetic and it being more villain focused, which is something that I feel like future Batman films did and would do better. But yeah, this isn't a terrible movie at all, and in all honesty, I kind of like it. It's worth a watch if you haven't seen it in a while. Up next we have Batman from 1989, or as it's more commonly known, Batman 89. Actually, comment below if you know why people call it Batman 89, I've got absolutely no idea. Is there like 89 Batmans in this film or something? It's been a while since I've seen it, I honestly can't remember. Now this is a movie that I watched quite a bit as a kid, not so much as I've gotten older, but I've always enjoyed it any time that I've rewatched it. Which I personally believe speaks volumes about a film that came out 8 years before I was even alive. I think at the time when this film came out, people were branding it as the most realist thing that they'd ever seen. This is Batman as you've never seen him before. Which is true because Adam West was Batman before Michael Keaton and everything was super camp. But honestly, looking at it now, this version of Batman is probably just about as camp, but just in a different light. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think this is a great start in taking Batman in a new direction. There's loads of stories out there about how protest letters were sent to Warner Brothers when it came out that Michael Keaton was going to be playing Batman, because fans didn't want them to make a funny movie. So in terms of taking it in a darker direction, I think they've done a pretty good job because that's right in Tim Burton's wheelhouse. He's made a career off dark, gritty, gothic-looking films, and obviously at the time this might not have been the case because I think he was coming off Pee-wee's Big Adventure. But in hindsight, he feels like the obvious choice to make a Batman movie. And the film, like I said, is okay. I think it's definitely better than Batman Returns, and in my opinion, this is an extremely solid Batman film. Just to cap off talking about Batman 89, I think Tim Burton was once quoted in an interview saying that he doesn't necessarily like Batman 89 as a movie, and he thinks that it has more cultural impact rather than seeing it as a great film. Which I kind of agree with, like I said, it's an extremely solid film, but I think it's one of those movies that just showed that you could adapt comic book movies seriously for the big screen. And speaking of serious movies, let's move on to Batman Begins. This film revitalized the franchise. Batman was not in a good place before this movie came out. It had taken 8 years before Warner Brothers were willing to take the plunge on another Batman film, and luckily enough, they had Christopher Nolan at the helm. Some people would argue that this is the best Batman film because of what it had to go through just to get made. I mean, people had completely written off Batman because of the whole George Clooney, Joel Schumacher era, and I wouldn't tell someone that they were wrong if they said to me that this was the best Batman movie. This is a really good film. And one thing I'll always remember from this film is Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow. He used to scare the living shit out of me because I was 8 when I saw this, and it probably wasn't the best decision of my parents to show me it, in all honesty. I was probably just a little bit too young for this level of dark and gritty Batman. I was actually probably still a good age for the Joel Schumacher Batman films, but I absolutely feel that this film deserves a lot more credit than it actually gets. The film really makes for an interesting comparison for what we were saying earlier about Batman 89 being campy, because they were going for a darker, more realistic feel, and after you've seen the Nolan films, you have to understand that you really can't see the Burton films as realistic, because to a certain degree, if you suspend your disbelief a tiny bit, this Batman could almost certainly exist in the real world. With a few exceptions, obviously, you can tell straight away this is a complete rehauling of the Batman franchise, and this is the perfect way to start a trilogy. Up next for me is The Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight Rises is set 8 years after The Dark Knight. I love the fact that they included Bane in this movie, considering the complete mess that they made of him last time. I also love the fact that Batman is dealing with a villain who is completely physically superior to him, and Batman is no longer in his prime. This movie is pretty good. The trilogy as a whole actually is very consistent, which is actually quite surprising because you don't tend to find that with trilogies usually. Usually the first one is pretty good, the second one takes it up a bit further, and the third one usually falls off a cliff, or one of the installments is usually a bit of a disappointment. Like, if we're really honest, there's not many trilogies out there, especially when you consider the entire history of film, that are just flawless. And listen, I know there's people out there that have a problem with The Dark Knight Rises, and listen, it's not a perfect movie by any means, but I've always liked it. I've always enjoyed the characters, loved Tom Hardy as Bane, even with the stupid voice, loved Christian Bale as Batman, even with his stupid voice, and loved Michael Caine as Alfred, even with his stupid voice. Look at him, all British and everything. You disgust me. I actually think that Michael Caine gives us the best interpretation of the Alfred character. This movie also includes Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who I assume, spoiler alert, became Batman and died immediately, and also Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. All great inclusions. Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon has to be one of the best comic book castings of all time. To me, personally, he's up there with J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. I just think he fits the part so well. This film has 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, and in all honesty, I think that's about right. You enjoy seeing all the characters again, because it had been 4 years since The Dark Knight, which was the last movie in the series, and this is just a really good ending to the trilogy as a whole. And finally, of course, my number one pick is 2008's The Dark Knight. I genuinely do believe that this is probably one of the best movies of all time. It's definitely in the top 50. This is a must-see film, and not just because of the iconic performance by Heath Ledger, and don't get me wrong, that's probably the best interpretation of the Joker that we've had so far, but just as a film, it's so great. I almost feel bad for some of the actors in this film because Heath Ledger does steal the show, and their performances don't necessarily get recognised as much as they should. For instance, Christian Bale is such a solid Batman. I know people have criticised his voice and everything, but as a Batman actor, he's definitely up there. He's certainly not the worst. I think this film came out at the perfect time for superhero movies. Iron Man came out the same year as this, and we were starting to see superhero films come out a lot more frequently. And honestly, I don't really need to sit here and give a review of this film. If you've watched this far, you know damn well how good this film is. And honestly, I'd welcome anyone to debate with me that this isn't the best Batman film that we've seen so far. Like I said earlier, I would take the debate that Batman Begins could possibly be the best because of everything that it had to go through. But in terms of just a straight up film, I think The Dark Knight is the best that we've seen so far. But honestly, I think that Robert Pattinson's got a good shot at taking the crown away from Christian Bale and Heath Ledger and The Dark Knight because they've got a good director behind it, and we're just going to have to see in 2022 when that film comes out. Obviously, Robert Pattinson's a tremendous actor, so I'll be looking forward to see how that goes down. But as it stands right now, this is how I rank the Batman films. And I think aside from the two Schumacher Batman films, this franchise has been pretty consistent, constantly bringing back a good return upon investment that studios are putting in, always gets decent critic ratings. And I also think that at different points in my life, I've loved all of these films. When I was a kid, I loved the Schumacher films, and it was only as I've gotten older that I realised how much of a train wreck they actually were. So Batman is pretty unique in the sense that I can't name too many franchises that I've liked every single film. It would only be a handful maximum. I'm also toying with the idea of ranking all the actors who've played Batman. If that's something you guys would like to see, don't forget to leave a comment and let me know. Also, let me know how you'd rank the Batman films. Are you looking forward to the Snyder Cut? Let me know below as well. And if you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like for more comic book movie content on my channel. You can follow me on Twitter here, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.